Well, some people say that you get used.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part 2 and the finale of SERAPHIM and the Dust Plague. Last month, you heard how 7 homeless men arrived in Moscow's Friendship Square, renamed Philadelphia Court by Mayor Lucy, and how Lucy and the city reacted to them while, in the backdrop, a deadly dust storm was making its way across the country. At intermission, the storm had hit. Confusion had commenced, and one of the homeless men, former Congress Mark Wilkins, quit his spot in Philadelphia Court to go see the mayor. Part 2 is what happens next. In the town, with the storm, with humanity in general, in the face of adversity, but under the guiding hand of divine providence. Because the recording cut out right at the end of part 1, Dr. Groshin will begin tonight 2 paragraphs back. Right at the moment the residents of this town realize the storm is heading for them. When you hear, he was going to see Lucy, that will be your sign part 1 has ended and tonight truly has begun.
We've all found out all at once, and at once as in suddenly. It's coming for us, and soon, and so it was chaos everywhere. Many people in the downtown dropped items in hand and started sprinting as if running from a tidal wave or some King Kong monster stomping in from the horizon to their cars, reasonable one might say, assuming they're thinking, okay, a day and a half, maybe 2, turn that key, fill the tank, drive away. Other people were actually standing in place as if frozen and screaming loudly. One lady, she not screaming, sat down on a bench and started scanning for flights on her phone. If one sat down next to her, they'd see she kept typing in Barcelona as point of origin, destination either Delhi or Tokyo, and she kept going back between those 2 in terms of where to land, but always out of Barcelona, and so she was not doing okay. One guy picked up a rock and threw it through a storefront's main window. Luckily, no one followed his cue. People were much too terrified to riot. He looked around a few times in that, what did I just do? Fashion, before himself breaking into a sprint and disappearing down some side street. Wilkins and the 6 other men were still in Philadelphia Court. Wilkins had been sitting, the usual of the past month plus, and maybe it had been 2 months now, who is counting? Sitting and seemingly doing nothing besides, but at least he was calm. Placid like a high altitude snow melt fed lake, his eyes blue and clear like Flathead Lake at sunrise. Yes, he looked calm because he was calm. And as the world looked to be ending around and about him, he got up, stooped briefly to tie his shoes, and started walking across town. He was going to see Lucy. What do you want? She asks him, standing behind her desk. He didn't even bother to knock. He walked right through the door. It was open. He's standing in the doorway now. Not that protocol or custom matters this moment. There's no front desk reception, no staff, no team. They're gone. Maybe the question is, why is she, Lucy, still here? I need you to tell everyone not to leave the town, Wilkins says. One sentence, and she recognizes his voice, just like Dave had. She sits down. Mark Wilkins, it's been you the whole time. You're the homeless. I need you to tell everyone, do not leave town. They need to know this. Everyone, tell them not to leave, please. Lucy makes a start to speak, but then shakes her head side to side twice. She lets out a chuckle. Please, Wilkins says, calmly, his voice, his demeanor, they have been the whole time. Tell everyone. Use whatever mechanisms are at your disposal, mass communications, a press release, email, WhatsApp groups, text chains, phone calls, please. Call them. Tell them, whoever. Now, there's no time to lose. Press release, Lucy says. She not calm, but her voice hardly above a whisper. She feels emotionally wrecked, drained, her energy drunk to the dregs by the ongoing vortex of it. She like bathtub remnants on the way out. The last 1/8 cubic foot of water. Now, that's not even a gallon. 0.935 gallons. On spin cycles, circling the drain. Oh, she's tired. Oh, her head. My head, she thinks, pinching her nose on the bridge harder and harder, now really pressing firmly until she can sense her pulse. Press release. She laughs. Press release. Are you Mark? Can I call you Mark? Wilkins says nothing. Listen, Mark. It's over. It's all over. My work, my life's work. Poof. Falling back into her chair as her hands, which had been clasped, come undone, then spread out, fully extending as far as her wingspan will allow. I don't know how I'm saying what I mean. What I'm trying to say is I don't know how to convey this to you, to anyone. I've just put in every last ounce of everything that I have. I mean, all of it, everything, all of me in this town. And so for it to all come apart at the seams, the moment when at first she breaks down and starts crying. It's not over, Lucy, Wilkins says. There's always hope. I'm offering you hope. But you have to act now. You have to tell everyone not to leave. This town is a sanctuary, and when the storm hits, those that are within these walls are going to see the other side of it, and you're going to lead them there, Lucy. But I beg you, every second counts. Act now. Lucy looks at him. Now, Lucy, do what you can. Now. It's a day later, 20 hours to be precise. Since she spoke to Wilkins, Lucy was right, of course. Few people heeded her call. And she put out the call, all the calls, every line, and without a second of hesitation, just like he demanded she do. Wilkins had left her office, and she allowed herself 1 minute, 90 seconds tops before flying into this headlong with all her usual gusto, focus, indefatigable energy. She had made all the calls, but head for the hills, the sea, the not here. That was the general response on the other side of the line. That's what most people did in response to her. I mean, she can't be serious. Call to stay put, shelter in place, ride out the storm. One can ride out a hurricane and hide underground, even underneath the fury of an F5 tornado. But by now, everyone had seen the photos of Syracuse in the aftermath. Everyone had seen the photos of what used to be Chicago. There was no facing this. There was only flight, terrified, fleeing, best done as quickly as possible. The town has a normal population of about 30,000 people. 2,500, maybe not even that much had remained. Dave was still here. He was with his wife until death do us part. And in terms of animals, all the dogs of the town who were either strays or had been left behind by their owners in the get out now mayhem were still in town. The dogs, they were well represented. Half of the city council, and credit to them, had stayed, with most remaining out of a Captain Edward Smith going down on the Titanic. Old school thought of a bygone era dutiful attachment to the town, but most especially to their mayor. I'm with the mayor no matter what. Would be under normal circumstances painfully cringe and threatening to cause an upset stomach even at mere mention. Here, now, it was beautiful. The dust plague was but 20 miles east of town, moving at 200 miles per hour. As Lucy and the remaining city council members sat in their usual seats amidst quite a few empty chairs and waited to hear what she was going to say, they were certain, down to the last man, down to the last woman, that they were here to hear some funeral oration their own, and were resigned, at least in theory, to their fate, to being sealed in by the dusty winds in this future sarcophagus, Mount Vesuvius style in the city center, if not only to be afterwards dissolved down to elemental foundations by the acid thing, the active ingredient thing. Yes, they were resigned, and with an austere and stoic-like bravery. The religious people in the room made their peace with God, the secular people with themselves, and there was a lot of niceness in the room. An outside observer would notice that. A lot of sincere, deep below superficiality, well wishes and thoughts, something like, I'll see you in another life, and we're off to a better place. Even the atheists, this outside observer would notice, even they were trying to go off on a positive note. Then Lucy spoke and she told them the plan, that the plan was no plan, but rather the homeless guy, this homeless guy who was a former congressman coming to see her personally and telling her to tell everyone to stay, that it was going to be all right, but that he offered no explanation, nor rational, nor scientific, nor anything actual reason why this was the case. And that he had then left, and that was it. That was the plan or the lack of a plan. And then Lucy made a joke about perspective and how maybe the truest saying in life is that life is what you make of it. And why don't we make the most of the few remaining minutes we have left, because they, all of them in that room, alongside most everyone in the town, had no doubt whatsoever that what was about to happen was the logical thing of what anyone would say would happen to a town in the direct eye of the storm path of 100-mile wide deadly front, moving at 200 miles per hour. And so Lucy suggested, tears coming to her eyes, why don't we finish this thing we call life with some love, huh? I love you all. It's been a pleasure. No, you see, it's been the honor of my life, serving with you. I love you all. And everyone in the room responded in kind, and most everyone was crying too, some weeping so heavily snot was smearing their faces, their shirt sleeves, their eyes. Lucy pulls out a book from her purse and turns it over a few times in her hands. She lifts it up for all to see. Thoreau's Walden. I think it would be fitting, appropriate at a time like this to hear some uplifting words, even if now for a final time. Her voice begins to crack, but she had cried enough. Everybody had cried enough. Any objections? Everyone shakes their heads. No objections. She opens the book to one of her pre-placed sticky notes reserved for the real gems, the great, not good parts, and reads aloud. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed. Desperation. From the desperate city, you go into the desperate country, and you have to console yourself with the bravery of minks and muskrats. A stereotyped but unconscious despair is concealed even under what are called the games and amusements of mankind. There is no play in them, for this comes after the work. But it is a characteristic of wisdom. Sound of the main room's door, boomerang walking off the door's frame, then bouncing back, then once more towards the frame, for it had been opened with considerable force, stops Lucy mid-sentence and turns the gathered party's collective attention towards the door. In that frame stands one of the 7 homeless men, Seraphim. Although they do not know his name, he, of course, wearing his one and same outfit. And he had a beer in his right hand, and he had a beer in his left hand. And on his head, that same hat. I've sung in the greatest choir in the universe. They are at rapt attention looking at him. He has not moved since opening the door. Now it is obvious, owing to the beers he is holding, that he had opened it with his foot, kicked it open. They are looking at him and he at them, and Lucy looks visibly sad. Did not the universe have the slightest decency to let them die in peace, to allow them at least the smallest autonomy of listening with no interruptions to Henry David Thoreau as the storm came and ushered them into eternity? Could not this man, this idiot, just go and stick his head in some toilet, some manhole, bury his head in the sand like an ostrich? A smile comes to Seraphim's face. He raises his hands, the beer foam higher up than everything, some of it lapping over the mugs and dripping down the sides, as he launches into a burped out version of the Star-Spangled Banner. Right around whose broad stripes and bright stars, the groans in the assembly become audible and sustained. Lucy, and she had done such a great job before, she had held back the tears, had been reading Thoreau with the clarity and gentle pace he deserved, buried her head into her hands, and began to weep. Great, just great, she thought. Great, great, great. With each mental great that passed across her internal thoughts, she cried all the harder, great, I'm going to die. We're all going to die being sent off by a homeless moron, burping the national anthem. All my life's work, she thought. And that was something that had often occupied her thoughts, even in the best of times. Her legacy, the mark she would make upon this town, how future citizens of this town would remember her. And yes, she would admit that she had often wondered if one day they'd speak about her in hushed tones, with reverence. She the best, the greatest, the most capable. Dare I dream, the most capable mayor in the history of this town, and just maybe why not, when the city council of the future was debating the pros and cons of allocating public funds to build a statue in her honor. Well, let me say this, and my grandmother, she was alive way back then. Let me tell you, let me say things were good back then, back when Mayor Lucy was in charge. A splendid era, a golden age, I say. But now, all my life's work reduced to this most pathetic display of human frailty, and I defeated by it. He defeated me, she kept thinking. This idiot stole my send-off and substituted his, and she kept on crying. He was still burping, almost done, but still burping. And she thought about T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland and what the poet would have said if this is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but a whimpering, homeless drunk burp singing. Look, listen, Seraphim says, speaking for the first time. Look. He points towards the windows and the assembly follows his finger. The wind's outside, they are howling. The wind is verifiably whipping, full-on churning, and yet here inside it is calm, impossibly calm. Seraphim walks over to the projector and flips it on. Search engine cleared, something typed in quickly. Search, clicked, a weather site. He scrolls, clicks, a map. And they sat there and looked and couldn't believe what they were seeing. Look, Seraphim says, now pointing at the screen. A few years ago, City Hall had invested in a state-of-the-art clean-cast, high-resolution audio-visual system. The picture was beautiful, clear, large. It just didn't make sense. It could not be. They kept looking. They started murmuring. A weather map, radar map, the dust plague tracker, and they had seen this before the past few weeks, ever since Syracuse for sure. And on these maps, the storm is usually portrayed by a blue-purple front with heavy metallic brown, that active ingredient, that acid, whatever it was. The metallic brown, all at the center, like an avocado cut in half, the center of the light green, that brown core impossible to miss. Brown, metallic acid, like a leaky battery, a melting battery of pain, like nuclear runoff in a broken sewage pipe, like pain, it looked painful, even in representation. And it had been like this on maps the whole time, but now on this map, it was all blue-purple. The storm was here. Look outside, howling, still howling, and some hail coming off it too, spitting off the roof, the windows, the roof being pelted. Pop, 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 like paintballs, like stones, like pebbles, like pop, 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 over and over. Good, consistent hail and so much wind. But it looked like a storm, like only, like just a storm. Nothing more, but it could not be. It was not to be believed. One councilman who had been tracking the storm on his phone had seen the brown core against the purple about 10 minutes ago and kept refreshing his phone, but the brown was gone. And he tried this site, then that site, this other radar page, this, nothing. The brown was gone. A breaking news alert cut into the radar map they were all watching, and a news anchor came onto the screen. She told them what she knew. And this was very much a developing situation, but here are the facts, just the facts. The dust plague storm, the one and same one they and everyone had been tracking foot by foot, second by second, had inexplicably broken. Inexplicably, because not only did they certainly not have an explanation, but it seemed no one did. And by the way, you saw it too, she said to her viewers. And the equipment we're talking about now, all this sophisticated weather stuff, it's sensitive down to the split particles, and you saw it, we all did. How the storm, full of all that brown stuff, stopped being so, and while a storm it remained, it was now something, or rather nothing more than a normal storm, some wind, some rain, some hail, some gusts, but the apocalypse or whatever. No, that had been avoided. But we don't know why. But the thing is, our trusted viewers at Channel Blank here on the 5 o'clock news know that as soon as we have something, anything, any information, you will be the first to know. For this, she concluded, was very much, if not the textbook definition of a developing story. Seraphim turns off the projector. The wind and the rain are still going on fairly intensely. Seraphim grabs a chair and sits down. He looks at them. All that's left of what once was the city council, Lucy too, Lucy especially. They don't speak. He is silent. This goes on for a good 10, 15 seconds until Wilkins did it, Seraphim says. Legend. The assembly is still speechless. Wilkins got it done. One man, one guy, willing to sacrifice. Legend. What are you, Lucy finally manages. What are you talking about? What do you mean? He told you, didn't he? Seraphim says to Lucy. No, she says. Told me what? No, he came to my office yesterday. He told me, said for everyone to stay, to not leave. I did that. I told people that. Yes, Seraphim says. And thank you for doing that. The 1,777 people left in this town are alive thanks to you, and thanks to Wilkins. 1,777, Councilman says. Are you serious? 1,777? You know the exact number, down to the unique individual? What next? Why don't you tell us how many unique raindrops have fallen in the storm? Or, yes, Seraphim says, cutting him off and quieting down the laughter. 1,777, that's right. That's how many people stayed in town, and in doing so, by heeding Lucy's call, and thanks to Wilkins, saved their lives. Those who left, they're dead. People will find all that out soon. You heard the newswoman. They're still piecing together all these loose strands. It's a developing situation, like she said. That's true. The storm, that now infamous brown part, went out with a bang. Before it dissipated, as we all just saw now, it split to the sides of us here and went into overdrive. Hypermax winds, poisonous dust funnels, and it caught them all. All those poor people trying to flee to the coast, the south, the hills, hide-in valleys, it got them. May they rest in peace. God rest their souls. Okay. Another councilman says, I, for one, have had enough of this nonsense, enough. You, he now standing, pointing at Seraphim in an accusatory fashion. You, I regret to say, are nothing more than some drunk, homeless bum. You and your lot, since you showed up, since you arrived here, have contributed nothing, done nothing, added nothing, polluted everything, and simply by your presence, you, sir, and I do hate to use the word sir, but you and your lot are worse than any dust plague. Haven't we suffered enough? Our little town life, our keep to ourselves, hardworking, bother no one, beautiful small life, first ruined by you just showing up. And now we've been through a natural disaster like no one has ever seen, terror and horror. And you come here burping your way through the door, talking nonsense, jibber jabbering you and us, all of us, into oblivion. These pseudo prophecies of yours, 2 cent and 2-bit charlatanism, pretending you have the gall to pretend you know what happened to those who left. I have had enough. Seraphim says nothing. Another council member raises her hand. A time like this, emotions like this, who says decorum in class have to go by the wayside? She appears to be waiting to be called on, and so Seraphim does. Who is Wilkins? She asks. You keep mentioning Wilkins. Mark Wilkins, Seraphim replies. The former congressman. He was here all along, incognito, but hiding in plain sight, sitting out there. He was the first of the homeless to arrive. There is loud and buzzing murmuring once more about the assembly. Seraphim continues. He got it done. He saved this town. Can you, the same woman asks, she of the formerly raised hand waiting to be called on, can you explain, please, how exactly? Yes, Seraphim says. God asked him to. The man who had previously had enough angrily gets up from his seat and leaves the room. Please, Lucy says, and slapping the table with her bare palm twice. Please, let him explain. Just let him explain. Thank you, Seraphim says. God asked him to do this. God sent an angel, me, with the following instructions, to ask something of Mark Wilkins, former congressman, and as such, as you know, a man of great worldly success and acclaim, even amongst his detractors. A man who, when I went to see him with this proposal, was living a retired life, retired at 48 in great luxury. A 100+ acre farm in central Washington, had just become a majority partner in a successful winery near Yakima, was mulling over a 7-figure plus offer to become president of Washington State University. The details were still being hammered out with the board in Pullman. They wanted him. And for him, it was some kind of back and forth to stay here on the farm, check up on the wines once a week, and cash in on his speaking fees whenever he felt like it. $100,000 per appearance. That's the kind of money people were willing to shell out to hear him give a motivational speech. Here's how you do it thing. He actually got $250,000 last year to do that for some bank in New York. Or come to Pullman, be university president, good life here, good life there, a win-win, can't go wrong. God sent me to ask him to give it all up. Give it all up, humiliate yourself, become the lowest of the low, at least to outside appearances, then die. The reward? Straight to heaven. Not just forgiveness of his sins, and let me tell you, they were grave and numerous, full forgiveness, a plenary indulgence. And better yet, for as you might have once heard, no man has greater love than this, to lay down his life for his friends. He would save all the people who stayed in this town from the coming disaster. Murmuring is full on talking now, arguing. Some people are getting really upset. And once more, Lucy, who is listening with great attention, has to bring order to the room. One thing is clear. Lucy holds real authority. She says, "Be quiet," and they listen. Seraphim resumes speaking. I understand so much this makes no sense to you. Here's the whole recap. I'll be as to the point as I can. God sent me, an angel, to a man, Mark Wilkins, a former congressman, fallen away Catholic, to offer him a proposal of salvation, a proposal to save his own soul and the lives of many more. God respects our free will. Wilkins could have said no. And please understand, if he said no, it's not that now he's going to be damned or now he's responsible for the deaths of the people he could have saved. No, the dust plague, as you call it, was coming. This was a most special offer, like I said before, that if you do this, and few people, almost no one ever is ever asked to do this, not only do you become responsible for others' lives in a good way, you are the hero who saved them. But most importantly, you receive the only reward there is, the eye has not seen, ear has not heard reward. Wilkins said yes. He didn't even need much time to think about it. Yes, he said. And he said yes, he explained to me, because I, this angel, was the confirmation of faith he had been looking for, and for which he had long given up hope finding. Wilkins had lost his faith. God does not exist. He became convinced. And so all the women, the money, the scandals, some of them public knowledge, but many more about which no one knows, all that was simply the rational actions of a man using his reason as he believed logically. God does not exist. Therefore, sin is not real. Therefore, I'm going to get what I can while I can. This is logical. Rather, it would be if God did not exist, but he does exist. And I was the proof he needed. And I saw that day I met him and proposed this to him. I saw not just repentance in his eyes, but joy, a joy not just of faith or belief or hope, but facts. St. Thomas, my Lord and my God, falling to his knees because he had put his hand in his side, his fingers in the nail marks. Do you understand what I'm saying? I look around this room and I see people riddled with doubt, overwhelmed by it. I can see your souls. I can see the despair, the radical refusal to believe in so many of you. And I'm telling you, that was what did it for him, Wilkins. He too did not believe, and while that saddened him, it made sense too, for it seemed belief was foolish. And so he had been living his life in this kind of quiet resignation to nothing. And I gotta say, Lucy, that reading you did before, that was spot on. That was spot on. And then it all changed. Then you mean this is real? You mean it's really real, actually real? So I think what came next for him was not that hard. But like I said, now he was no longer living in the expectant hope of faith, no matter how firm. No. Now he was confirmed in the factual reality of what faith proposed. And what came next was him selling everything he had and giving it all away. It was a nice haul, the total donations. Here, there, everywhere, about $15 million in sum. Having turned to God, having become perfectly materially poor so as to become spiritually rich, the last step was to come to this town, as he did, and sit in that center square and suffer the derision of others. Here was his great act of fraternal love. Could he love God so much that in order to love his neighbor perfectly, he would be willing to give it all away as he had, and then appear before them as a penniless pauper? And if anyone recognized him, all the better. For what a fall from grace, what an embarrassment. See, this is the lot of all politicians at last, humbled, and good for him, good that what goes around comes around. If, by that same and singular grace of God, he can withstand all this silent as a lamb before the shearer, God would grant him heaven and this town a reprieve. And so it came to pass. Wilkins got it done. He did it. From the moment I saw that joy of facts on his face to a few hours ago, when he died outside of town, the last part of his mission to head into the storm and try to convince any remnant stragglers to get back to safety, he did it. And he's happier than happy now. You would not believe what a complete and perfect happiness is his now and forever. And maybe you've been given something more too. I don't know. Maybe you've received something a little like he did, a little lifting of the veil, a help to your flagging faith, maybe the first spark of a faith that never was until now. But let me tell you, none of you have any idea why things happen as they do. God's given you an extremely rare moment to have even a little of it explained, just a little. And it's true. Blessed are those who haven't seen and yet believe. And not without reason did God once ask a man, where were you when the foundations of the world were laid? You, all of you here, all of you everywhere, everyone, you have no idea. You've heard that God works for the good of those who love him, and it's true, but so many of you don't love God. And yet he loves all of you so much. You have no idea. I'm not just talking about, look around the sky, sunsets. God is an artist. God is love. Yes, all that is true, but so many of you say it like a cliche, like you don't even believe it and moving on anyways. I'm saying God holds everything in perfect harmonious balance by a sovereign providential plan, and yet never, not even for a second, violates our free will. Angels and men, us too. Isn't that so cool? Seraphim says, taking a sip of the beer in his left hand and a sip from the other mug too. So amazing. It's hard for the angelic intellect to grasp as well, believe me. That perfect spider silk thin balance between he's always in total control and we're totally free. And all he wants is for us to choose him and love him. And in doing so, we'll be choosing our best selves too. Ha, another sip of the beer, double mug. Well, that's a nice cliche for you. Best self, best version of yourself, huh? Well, yeah, it's true, but none of you have any idea. A man gets up in the assembly. The seraphim has already read his mind. He points at the man. Why? Seraphim says, asking rather, why did God allow this? How could God, if God is good, allow such evil? Why doesn't God prevent all evil, by the way? Why didn't God just stop the plague from spreading, better yet materializing in the first place? The man slumps back down in his chair. You do not understand anything, Seraphim says. Humanity. And it's beautiful. God looks on all this with love. He made you with limitations. You're not supposed to understand all the things, and you only fall into trouble when you try to grasp it all, get all of it, every ounce of meaning and purpose, and just why into your heads. But you can't. You weren't made to. And that really is so much of the problem here. You all trying to be something you're not meant to be, and in fact, do not possess the requisite material to be. You first deny God, deny a larger universal plan, then deny smaller truths, all truths, and somehow it is at that point you believe you can, what, with your science and your formulas, understand it all. You have no idea how much that makes all of us laugh, us angels. Nothing is as funny as that. The human being who believes he is self-made, self-sufficient, capable of understanding everything, Seraphim says, pausing to take another left, then right deep drag on his beer. He's what they call a deep drinker. It looks like a normal swig, but after just one, a quarter of the mug is drained. Understand everything, he says again. I tell you, I know. We know from watching you. You hardly understand the most basic things. And when it comes to things more rudimentary than that, simpler than basic, treat others with respect, see God's image and likeness in all people, do unto others well. So anyways, like I was saying before, to answer your question, Mr. Young, pointing to the had stood up, then slumped back down man. God is in charge and allows things to happen because he is in charge. I know that sounds circular. Let me explain. God gave people free will. There is no love without free will. God making us puppets and forcing us to love him is not love, and is no different than a man forcing a woman to marry him. Maybe she does love him, even under those circumstances, but he'll never know. God, who is love, God is love, cannot contradict himself. He cannot do evil. To restrict the free will of his crown creation would be evil. You would all be the bride walking to the altar, deterministically led by fate, by tyranny, by everything except your own choice. What can you, pathetic human beings, give to God? What can you hope to give to God, who is infinitely perfect in himself, who needs nothing? One thing, your will. You can choose freely to say yes to him day after day unto eternity forever. And here, it's nothing but love. You, the bride, you choose him, the divine spouse, and that is love, and nothing else is love. So as you know, Adam and Eve told God no. God, always in charge, allowed man to abuse his free will, to say no, because that's love, like I just said. That's love, that's freedom. Adam and Eve said no. And so, okay, that great fall began this constantly falling world. So that's the beginning of an answer for you, Mr. Young. Bad things happen because you humans decided to choose the bad, And you choose the bad still today. And you keep choosing the bad. You want some what? Religious proof that sin is real? Seraphim starts laughing. I didn't think so. The most optimistic believers admit it's unfortunately true, whereas 98% of everyone else, from the low-burn pessimists, the midnight black-pilled nihilists, wallow in it. People had a choice. They chose sin, and so they got the fallen world that comes with that. It's disease, wars, plagues, death, destruction. But before you protest, this all-powerful God, what did he do in response? Oh, happy fault that merited for us, for you, so great a Redeemer. Even the most bitter atheist would admit, if he believed this to be true, original sin, then God certainly had the right to obliterate mankind. Because they did literally the one thing he told them not to do. But no, God, who is love, will not be outdone in goodness. That's your true answer, Mr. Young. It is that God always has a plan that is perfectly good until man, by misuse of his free will, thwarts it, leading to God responding by making the new plan better than before. Comply with God and things go swimmingly, but resisting him will not lead to overcoming him, for his response will be something even better, your disobedience and infidelity responded to by love, providential care, goodness. If you remember one thing before I get out of here, let it be this: God cannot be outdone in goodness. His original plan for you is good, and his response to your failings is even more goodness. He always brings about the good, good from good, good from bad, even out of what appears to be hopelessness. Now, some things that seem bad to you are not. And some of these you do understand. The guy born into poverty who swears later in life, he's some kind of successful businessman, as you put it, that it was because of his poverty, not in spite of it, that he became a success. The Dominican baseball player, yes, I became a major leaguer because of the horrible equipment and rock-strewn fields, using a milk carton for a glove, all that. And I bet that without this blessing that seems to many a disadvantage, I'd probably not have made it. With the quote-unquote advantages of well-manicured fields, shiny new bats, shinier cleats and gloves, I'd probably quit playing at age 12. Lesser thought of still are things like the guy with the scar or the mole or whatever on his face that made him self-conscious enough to be humble and pure. Without this bad thing, he'd already have drowned in a pool of sin, licentiousness, broken hearts and lives, all kinds of diseases. But this one thing kept him in check and gave him the happy life and happy marriage he has now. And another person just crippled by anxiety, and they can't stop worrying. They just worry about all things all the time, and people pity them. But it's precisely this bad thing that has made them a good-hearted, empathetic person on the path to holiness. Without it, they have no fear of God, no respect of others, no respect for anything, drunk on their own imagined power, would be lying destitute in some ditch somewhere. But you understand nothing. That's what I'm saying. Would it change your mind if I told you that this dust plague actually saved your country, at least for a few more decades, and maybe by then you'll have gotten it together? Saved your country because while many died because of it, and many of your cities lie in ash, it's nothing compared to what would have happened without it. For, and I kid you not, seeing all this dust plague destruction has led a very important foreign leader who's about to lay complete war-driven ruin to your country to take compassion upon you. I'm not a monster, am I? He's asking himself right now. I can never invade a country, not like this, not at this time of great need, these poor people. And he's not going to invade. But he doesn't understand the providential hand here. No one does, except you in this room. Or what about the countless people who had to die by way of the dust plague, but are now in heaven? Had they lived longer, they would have fallen into grave sin, many of them. And not predestination here, no, not that they were meant for sin and perdition, for you all know God desires all men to be saved. No, by their free choice, they would have fallen into sin, but they died not like that, not in sin. For them, for thousands of these people, yes, I can tell you there were thousands, salvation in Christ came in the form of a dust plague. But you don't understand any of this. All of life is like this, hidden, at times known to God alone, and we messengers, well, sometimes he allows us to let you in on this divine comedy. I use this term in its classic sense. All of life is a comedy, as in a happy ending. You're all meant for eternal perfect bliss with God, and he works so hard to help you, influencing you, prodding you, suggesting, dropping hints to get you there. Some people need a little help. Some people need to get killed in a dust plague to avoid damnation. But you understand nothing. And as such, perhaps this last story I'll leave you with will be most illustrative of all. You all know Miss Wilcox walking past us in Friendship Square, and as Mayor Lucy renamed it, Philadelphia Court. Right about that time, walking past us, dropping her eggs, as I jumped to exclaim a hello to her. You all know Miss Wilcox of the would-be $1 million lawsuit in formerly Friendship Square, Philadelphia Court, and the broken eggs, the spilled milk. To her, my yelling and causing the event was just the straw on the camel's back, these homeless scum, and so on. But I saved her life. She dropped the groceries and returned to the co-op and repurchased them and then went home. Had her original path not been altered, she would have been killed by a car crossing the street a little past us. No, it wasn't her timing. She still has to do something for her future grandson who isn't born. 24 years from now, then she'll be free to go. You understand nothing. You see, least of all, how much God really loves you and takes care of you in every moment. There is no murmuring amongst the assembly now. There is no sound, nothing, no one says anything, and cannot help looking, maybe even staring at Seraphim. And everyone is kind of frozen like that. Seraphim begins to sing an a cappella version of Adoro Te Devote. And while no one in the room knows this song, and if you have no idea that Latin is the language he is singing in, it is strong evidence for his self-proclaimed angelic status. It is beautiful to a level simply not human in capacity, off a human scale, any kind of scale. He finishes singing and disappears before them. The near-empty beer mug smashed to the ground and then slowly recede into nothingness, disappearing not as fast, but all the same as he did. And that, one would have to admit, is pretty freaking cool. Nice exit, you'd have to say. The assembly keeps staring ahead at the spot where he had been standing, speaking, singing. They don't even notice the sunlight pouring in through the glass panes, the glass wet from the rain, but steadily being warmed by the sun. The sun emanating from a blue sky, a high blue sky, which at present does not contain even a single cloud, because it really is a most beautiful town. Thank you.